Hi YouTube, I'm Remarx or RemmaruX, and today we're going to be reacting to Deltarune Theory, is Susie half human? Yeah, this is a very interesting topic to be discussing. We know that Susie bleeds at the end of chapter 4, and I'm guessing that's like what sparked this theory, but I'm not quite sure. So let's just dive right into it. This is by Lynx Griffin. If I say that wrong, please correct me. Let's give a like and a subscribe, and then let's dive on in.
So, before the new Deltarune chapters released, I had the thought of doing a video for a crack theory. What if Susie is actually half human, half monster? However, I was already pretty busy with plenty of other projects, and I figured, hey, this is a crackpot theory. It'll probably get debunked real fast with the
Yeah, people thought it was a crackpot theory, but now that we know that Susie bleeds, it's like, And we know that Sans bleeds in Undertale as well, but he is from Deltarune, or so a lot of people think.
new chapters anyway. I won't worry about it. And then this happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hell with it. Let's talk about it.
Is Susie half human?
Before we can even get
Let's
into
dive
that,
in.
there's another question that
Sorry guys, I'm having recording issues, but yeah.
needs answering first. In Deltarune's universe, would that even be possible?
What's up with
Unfortunately, there isn't
Deltarune
much in
monster
the way of a
biology?
solid answer we can give here. Honestly, you can talk yourself in circles trying to work out what is going on with monsters and blood. Our
Yeah,
primary
it's
point
really
of comparison is
confusing, especially
Undertale,
from
where I think I can say with
Undertale.
certainty that someone being half human and half monster would be impossible.
Yeah,
Monsters and humans are fundamentally different from one another in this universe. Humans are physical beings with significantly stronger souls that can persist after death.
right.
Monsters, meanwhile, are mostly magical, with far weaker souls that are tied very closely to their bodies. They immediately poof into dust upon death. These mechanics are essential to Undertale's gameplay and plot.
And we know that some part of this carries over to Deltarune because we know that Gerson's uh, dusts is inside of the thing that Susie, you know, yeah.
They're how the human child can take down the king of monsters with nothing but a stick, and why the amalgamates are
It's
so
because
upsetting. And this physiological
determination and that
difference would
humans are
make
a lot
half
stronger
human
than
monsters impossible.
monsters.
But what about Deltarune's universe? It's safe to say that the rules are very different, but the specifics still seem up for debate. The main point of contention is whether or not monsters have blood in Deltarune's universe, since they seem to all lack it in Undertale, with one notable exception.
Yeah, with Sans. I'm certain that. Sorry, guys, I'm having recording issues. Let's dive into it.
While blood is a hallmark of being a human with a physical body, there are a ton of little tidbits to find here and there, and the sources are not often reliable. Susie says that everyone bleeds. Is that actually true, or is it just her personal experience? Is the warrior being literal when yelling, "My blood is boiling for battle," or is he just a weirdo that's using an expression? Is the bunny child you can talk to at the apartments correct when asking Krisk if it hurts to be made of blood, or are they just a little kid who doesn't really get how the
No,
world
biology
works?
works, yeah.
Does Lancer know what blood is with his bucket to catch the blood in because it's typical of all Lightners, or just humans? If monsters are familiar with blood, why did no one clean the blood stain in Chris's room until Susie points out how to do so? Would Toriel just
That
leave
would
that
lead
uncleaned if she
Susie
knew
to
how to
be
clean it?
half
If
human,
monsters
possibly.
do bleed normally, why would they also poof into dust upon death when that was a result of monsters having magical bodies in Undertale? Was Susie's shock upon finding the case containing Gerson's remains because of the realization that Gerson was dead, or because she had never seen a monster grave?
Whether this theory becomes right or wrong, I definitely think Toby is making a decision uh, to only let Susie bleed and not anyone else. So
Object before, or both? How do you account for some outlier monsters that definitely would not have blood, like ghosts, slimes, or fire elementals? Do the lyrics referencing blood in Raise Up Your Bat indicate anything about monsters specifically? Is the Monsters for Humans in Your Area pop-up ad that Chris can get indicative of an actual ad, or just a gag like the Darkness for Lightners ad is for Ralsei? Is there any substantial difference between human and monster souls at all in Deltarune the way there is in Undertale? So far,
there's
there's
lots of
no indication
questions.
that that's the case. Like I said, you can talk yourself in circles with these bits of info. But the way I see it, in regards to Susie bleeding, you can boil it down to two options. One, it is typical for monsters to bleed in Deltarune, and Susie is not special in that regard. Two, it is not typical for monsters to bleed in Deltarune, and Susie is an outlier.
I'm guessing that they're going to say that number two is what's happening. But I do think number one is interesting as well, but I think number two would have more interesting story implications, so
But here's the
if it was
kicker,
right.
either option you pick, I think I can come to an important conclusion. One, monsters are physical beings in Deltarune, not magical. Two, the gap between monsters and humans in Deltarune is much, much smaller than it is in Undertale. Monsters and humans are ultimately just different kinds of people.
Yeah,
And
and they're on the
three,
surface as
based on
well, so
this, someone being both half human and half monster is theoretically possible. Much
I'm
of the
guessing
confusion about monster biology
monster
stems from Susie
biology in
herself,
Deltarune isn't
or rather
magical
from her perspective based on her experiences. She's the one who probably brings up blood the most. How she thinks it's pretty cool, how she expects it to be the norm, and even how she knows how to clean up bloodstains.
Yeah, and Blood Crushers too, that uh movie that she keeps talking about being brought up so often, you have to think like, is this intentional by uh the Deltarune uh team, you know?
This is something that she has experience with. But aside from that, Susie's relationship with her own monsterhood seems, well, fraught. In some ways, it mirrors Chris's dislike of their own humanity, although not to as violent a degree as Chris. There's a couple of
The thing is that uh spoilers for the Weird Root in chapter 4, um when Chris pricks Noelle's finger with the thorn which is the thorn ring in the Dark World, um like it is shown that the soul is like breaking, or like the thing is like red, and we know that soul is linked with determination, possibly, but I don't know if we actually get to see if uh she bleeds or not, so it's interesting.
places that this comes up. In the very first block pushing puzzle in Chapter 1, there's a little extra dialogue where you can get with Rouse and Susie, in which Susie describes dressing up as a box for Halloween. When pressed on it, she says, "Well, it's not like I could dress up as a goddamn monster." And honestly, even as a joke, this is a bit of an odd response. Dressing up as a monster for Halloween is something typical for humans. If Susie is just a monster, why would dressing up as one in a costume even cross her mind?
Because I feel like human culture is a lot closer to monster culture in this universe.
Monsters are just different kinds of people in this universe, after all. Later in Chapter 1, during the fight with Spade King, he taunts Susie with this line: "Show my son the monster you really are." She pauses for a minute before responding with, "Alright, you want to see what I can do?" To me, this is another odd exchange.
Do
Again,
we think they're like segregated communities, humans and monsters? I don't know. I don't know about
in
that,
this
but
universe, monsters aren't really monstrous the way we would view them in most media. Why would King describe being a monster as if it were a negative thing? And more importantly,
if that
why
wasn't
would
already
Susie
a
take it that
preconceived
way?
notion that
Susie
was
seems to be holding on to
popularized
this
in the
idea that what
universe.
makes her scary are the aspects of her that are most monstrous. When the other kids in the class describe being afraid of Susie's bullying, they're afraid that she'll beat them up like a normal school bully. This definitely
It is possible that they are scared of her other than like other monsters, because that she's a dinosaur, and like a dinosaur monster, uh typically dinosaurs are seen as aggressive in media, so
seems to be how Snowy and Monster Kid believe she operates anyway. But when Susie is really serious about scaring someone, she uses one of her more monsterish qualities: her teeth. Her go-to threat is suggesting that she'll bite someone, and she threatens Chris with it multiple times, both seriously and as a joke. She's far from the only monster in town with monster qualities such as sharp teeth, claws, hooves, or horns, things that might harm a normal human. But she's the only one that seems to treat these features as potentially dangerous, especially towards Chris. There's also the matter of one of Noelle's subjects of interest, Susie's tail. She seems deeply embarrassed about it, and it's not clear why. She hides it whenever possible, even though there should be no need to in a town full of monsters. Plenty of monsters have tails, so just having one at all shouldn't bother her. If she's anxious about the fact that it's a small tail, Why does she believe that it should be bigger? Is there perhaps something in her lineage that left her with a smaller than normal tail? While Susie does reveal a bit more
Interesting. That is
about her
interesting.
backstory in chapters 3 and 4, there are still some frustrating details that she omits, such as what kinds of communities she lived in before, who her parents are, and who she's living with currently in hometown. What
So
she
many
does describe is
questions.
that she moved around a lot and that no one's ever really treated her with kindness. I was always the scary girl, the bad kid. The only times anyone would ever get close to me were as a joke. They told me I wasn't allowed to play it. It's clear from what Susie describes of her past is that she was not initially a bully that drove people away from her. Rather, it's that everyone else was deeply unkind and dismissive of her, and this loneliness led to her lashing out in anger. You get
Exactly.
told you're a bad person often enough, and you start to believe it and act on it. The question is, what about Susie would make others so unwilling to give her a fair shake in the first place? All of these little tidbits about Susie, in addition to the now clear fact that she's capable of bleeding, paint a picture of a teenager who has a foot in two cultures but doesn't really feel like they belong to either one. Someone who understands one half of who she
Chris and Susie might be connected in that kind of way, right? Because Chris is in a town full of monsters, and Susie has been around humans a lot in her past, uh, potentially. So yeah,
is fairly well, but doesn't really like or trust the other half. Someone who's been treated badly by others for no reason aside from what she appears to be. It really does feel to me like the reason behind all of her experiences with both humans and monsters is because she is half human, half monster. But I understand that that might not be convincing enough. Maybe she was just raised in an entirely human community and got a completely inverse experience from Chris. Maybe monsters just have blood in this universe, and that's no
I
indication of
think
Susie
that's more
being
likely
half
than
human.
she actually being half human. But
But
let's see
here's
this
where the real
evidence.
curveball comes in. Yep,
That's
it's
possible.
time to get really
Sans
wild and
bleeds,
speculative.
but
Folks who
Papyrus
are
does
big into
not bleed.
theorizing probably knew this would get mentioned eventually. There's one other monster that we see bleeding in Undertale and Deltarune, and it's Sans in the final moments of his boss battle in the No Mercy route. Sans in Undertale being originally from the Deltarune universe is a theory that's been around for a while, and personally, it's one that I put a lot of stock into, enough that I feel confident to apply it to this
I think the
theory. I
soundtrack in
won't go
Chapter
into
4
all of
kind
the
of
details for
confirmed
this
that
now,
he
as
is
there's
from
plenty of
Deltarune.
other posts and videos out there that do it better justice. But I will say that I think this trans-dimensional aspect applies to both Sans and Papyrus. In Undertale, QC does mention that both Sans and Papyrus suddenly showed up in Snowdin. And in the
Right.
summer 2023 newsletter, during another Papyrus Q&A, one question asks where Sans and Papyrus were originally from before coming to Snowdin. Papyrus starts to answer somewhere with
And then
green grass
Sans
before
cuts him
suddenly
off.
being cut off by Sans. Going off the assumption that both Sans and Papyrus traveled from Deltarune's universe to Undertale's, some new questions arise. One, if they're the same person, why keep Papyrus's appearance in Deltarune hidden from us for so long? Two, why does Sans bleed in Undertale but Papyrus doesn't? And three, in Undertale, why does Sans know what a human looks like but Papyrus doesn't? I'm going to propose probably my wildest take in this video yet. In Deltarune, Sans and Papyrus are brothers, yes, but they have one human parent and one monster parent. Sans takes
Interesting.
after the monster one, while Papyrus looks like the human one. There's been a lot of speculation regarding Papyrus and Deltarune and why we haven't seen him at all.
At
Before
first, knowing Chapter 1 and 2, I thought it was possible that we weren't seeing Papyrus because Toby was going to show Papyrus, but it kept getting delayed and delayed. But now that we're deep into Chapter 4, we're halfway through the game. I think that it is very possible that there is a reason, and Papyrus was meant to not show up in Deltarune until the end, or yeah, or maybe not even at all.
I suspect that a lot of that speculation poured into the idea of Papyrus as the knight, but we now know that's pretty much debunked. A running theme in Deltarune has been Chris's conflict with us, the player. There are some things that Chris agrees with us on, some things they'll protest about, and some things where they'll actively fight us over. For the most part, meeting new people and talking to them is nothing that we as the player get a lot of pushback on, even when it makes Chris uncomfortable. But we also know that Chris has a great deal of baggage regarding being a human and seems to strongly dislike reminders of their own humanity. Papyrus is a character that I would venture to say most in the fandom are desperate to see at this point.
Exactly.
We've been asking what's going on with him forever. So imagine the Chris and player conflict that could ignite if, after all of these years and all these chapters, the teasing finally ends and we get to see Papyrus in person, and it's another human. Someone that Chris would want absolutely nothing to do with.
Because they
How would
hate
that
humanity.
clash
Well,
between what the player wants and
it's
what
not clear if
Chris
they
wants
hate
get
humanity, but
reconciled? Of course, then the question
they
arises,
despise them
well,
in a
if
way.
Papyrus looks human in Deltarune,
Probably not as
why
much
is he
as
then obviously a skeleton monster
Kara
in
in
Undertale?
Undertale, but
And
I'm not
well,
sure.
there's a couple of Papyrus lines from Undertale that I've been giving a second look. Papyrus dabs MTT brand Bishy cream behind his ear. Papyrus realizes that he doesn't have ears. I'd like to drive down a long highway, wind in my hair, sun on my skin. Now, the Occam's razor explanation for these lines are that they are just jokes. Jokey jokes for us, the player. Silly Papyrus, you're a skeleton. You don't have skin and hair. But now, I can't help wondering, is Papyrus in on the joke? Why would the jokes even occur to Papyrus if he has no experience with humans and what they look like? It's almost like he says and does these things just out of reflex. There's also this joke from the summer 2023 newsletter interviewing Papyrus, which is probably also just for fun, but is an interesting response nonetheless. Papyrus has a lot of naivety about things and doesn't seem to pick up on social cues very well, but he's also not stupid. However, when it comes to humans, there does seem to be this huge gap in his knowledge, one that Sans doesn't share but also doesn't seem interested in correcting. It makes sense for most monsters in
Yeah,
Undertale to not recognize a human, since they likely haven't seen one before.
but
But if
skeletons are
Papyrus is also from Deltarune,
based
his
on
knowledge of
humans.
humans should be the same as
A
Sans's.
human
Is
skeleton.
there perhaps something that he's experienced that removed that knowledge, maybe even for his own sake? We know that the universe rules between Undertale and Deltarune are different. So what would happen if you entered a new universe where your very existence breaks the rules? This is getting into perhaps the most out there speculation thus far, but hey, this is still a crack theory. But I wonder if perhaps when Sans brought them both to Undertale's universe, Papyrus had to undergo a drastic change from half human to fully a monster in order to even enter that universe. Maybe
Interesting.
the machine was part of what did it, or maybe Sans had a hand in it to ensure that his brother was able to stay with him in Undertale. Or maybe the universe itself initiated this change. Maybe Papyrus couldn't exist in Undertale with Sans without first being patched. But if Papyrus did suddenly get an unexpected transition from human to monster, that seems like the kind of traumatic experience that could, say, create a pervasive amnesia around
Amnesia.
humans and what they're
Yeah,
actually like. Something that
that
might
is
leave
possible.
lingering scars, like offhandedly assuming you had ears and hair. Something that would make it difficult for Papyrus to fit in and make friends with other monsters when he's otherwise an ostensibly kind and cheerful guy, if a little self-centered. Something that Sans would absolutely not talk about in order to protect Papyrus. Heck, imagine Sans in this scenario. He's brought his brother to this universe to escape some great calamity, only to not just wind up in a situation just as dire, but to have his brother permanently altered as a result. And there's nothing he can do to correct it. The machine can't be fixed, after all. No wonder he keeps Papyrus in the dark about humans until there's one right in front of them, and the subject can no longer be avoided. No wonder
Yeah,
he continuously hypes up Papyrus's good qualities and insists that others need to treat him kindly. No wonder he refuses to act until the last possible moment in the no mercy route, when trying to act preemptively last time has produced these results. No wonder a human child showing up in front of him one day is so hilarious. And anyway, isn't it such an interesting thing that Undertale has a joke about humans descending from skeletons, and then Deltarune has a parallel joke about skeletons coming from humans?
it's interesting. I do say
Now, you may be
there's something
looking at all
going
of this
on.
crackpot speculation and wondering, well, what's the point of all this? What would SUSIE and potentially the Skelebros being half human even add to Deltarune's story beyond just being a very weird
Lore.
bit of world building?
Yeah.
Well, I can think of a couple places where this could be relevant, some
Well,
small
definitely
and
with
some big.
Chris's, correlation. It's kind of a
After we see SUSIE defy Carol's demands in Chapter 4 and
dichotomy.
declare that she'll be taking Noelle to the festival, it's hard to imagine that Carol won't retaliate in some form. Trying to ground her own daughter is likely to just get Chris and SUSIE to break her out, creating stronger bonds between them. and the police aren't available to bust Susie for
because,
delinquency at the moment.
Undyne got
Even Toriel seems to
into
be
shelter.
heavily in Susie's corner. But Carol might have some knowledge of Susie's parentage or be able to easily access it. It seems like she keeps an iron grip on the town. She likely has access to things like apartment leases or adoption papers from when Susie and her parents or guardians moved to hometown. Whatever hope Susie has growing in her heart now, she still does not feel comfortable revealing anything about her family to her friends, and this is something that could be used against her. Carol could play that card and reveal Susie being half human as a means to remind her that she is an outcast that doesn't belong with any community. While sure, Noelle would not care about
Chris
that
is right
aspect of
there.
Susie, Susie is only just starting to
And like
feel like
she's
she
okay with
belongs,
Chris.
that she's really been picked out as someone capable of good.
Well, we know she's okay
Carol
with
using
us,
this
but
aspect of her family life to push back with the idea that she is
Simi
inherently
kind of
bad and
via
unwanted,
Chris.
that she does not belong here and does not deserve real friendship, could be a truly devastating blow to Susie.
It
Now,
is, yeah.
before you all panic, no, I don't think that Chris is secretly half monster. The game has gone to great pains to emphasize Chris's humanness. It really seems to be one of the driving forces of angst for them. Chris wishes that they were a monster just like their adoptive family, tries to make themselves look like one during their
The
childhood,
headbands.
and tries to avoid or stamp out any
Headband.
reminder that they
Singular,
are
sorry.
human. Which is why it could be very important to their development if Susie was partially human. Chris greatly looks up to Susie and appreciates her, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that much of that admiration stems from her being a cool monster in their eyes. Like with Asriel, Susie is a lot of what Chris wishes they were. So, what would it mean for Chris to learn that this monster they're friends with and care about has some amount of human in them too? Perhaps if their character develops enough towards it, they can then see that the parts of themselves they dislike are also a
But
part of the people they
yeah,
deeply care for.
which
And in
is
seeing that, to learn
interesting.
how to forgive themselves for being human. Chris can't change what they are any more than Susie could change what she is. But they could, at the very least, see some of themselves reflected in the people they care about, and in turn, learn to care for themselves as well.
Defying the prophecy.
These last chapters have definitely driven home a very important theme about challenging fate, even when it seems completely impossible. There's a sentiment now going around that perhaps Susie was never intended to be part of that original prophecy, and that her taking that spot as one of the destined heroes will be what's necessary
I
to
think that might
finally
be part of
avoid
the
a
story.
tragic outcome. It's an idea that I think has a lot of merit. What if the human, the monster, and the prince from the dark that Rousey describes in his original prophecy are not actually the people we've been led to believe they are?
Because this is
Fate
his
seems to be
version
tied
of
so
the
strongly to the
prophecy.
roles these various characters are supposed to
This is
play. Things will happen as
the
predetermined
one in the first Dark
because you
World
were
is
made to act
real.
out this part. But does any
The
one
second
person
one
in the
is
story
just out of order,
really
but it's
only
still
have
true.
one set role? Are they a hero or a villain? Is he an object or a person? Is she a human or a monster?
I love that
Why
scene.
can't they be
And
both
this
at
scene.
once? Why can't they be even more things? And in fact, by being more than one thing, don't they then
It
stand as
adds so
best
much
suited
to
to
her
defy fate
character.
and change the story that's supposedly already been set out for them? I really like to think so. And, well, that's the idea. If you were looking for a lot of hard evidence proving that Susie is definitely half
Yeah, it's not
human,
here.
then I don't think you'll be finding that here or anywhere else, at least until the next chapters. It is a crack theory, but funny enough, it's one that I feel like has only grown on my brain more with these new chapters.
I
I
would
think it
be
has the
delighted
potential
if
to
it
answer a
was
lot of
true in
questions
canon.
regarding character backstories and motivations across both Undertale and Deltarune. But in the extremely likely event that it gets the legs kicked out from under it next chapter, it's still a lot of fun to
Like Bloody
speculate in the
Theory, Chess
meanwhile.
Theory,
In any
kind of.
case, I had fun making this video, and I hope that you had fun watching it.
Oberon's Smog,
This
yeah.
sort of
All the
edited
theories kind
video
of
is
got, a
definitely
lot of theories
outside of my
got,
usual wheelhouse, so I hope you forgive
disproven.
my amateur mistakes. If
No,
you've
it's
got your
fine.
own
I
thoughts
really
on this
enjoyed this
theory,
video.
feel free to let me know in the comments below. Usually my time is spent in the Undertale and Deltarune fandoms making fan art and long-form fan comics. You might know me from Dogs of Future Past and Paper Trail, and my current long-form project is Eldritch Rune, which is a Dark Deltarune AU. Feel free to
Interesting.
subscribe to me here on YouTube or follow me on
Go
my
check them
Tumblr,
out,
Blue Sky,
guys.
and Twitch for more of what I make. Once again, thanks so much for watching, and I hope that you have a lovely day.
Thank you. This was a great video. I enjoyed it a lot. Make sure to subscribe to Lynx Griffin. Um, yeah. I believe Susie was definitely raised among humans, both because she knows about how to clean the blood in Chris's room, and it takes her a while to realize what the hammer was. Yeah, and because that's more known in, monster culture. So it's interesting. I really like it. That's the end of the video. So I hope everyone has a great day. Bye, YouTube.